Welcome to the C.S. Joseph Podcast, Premium Edition. I'm your host, C.S. Joseph. Welcome to one of my many humble abodes. Today's episode is the Hypocrisy of ISFJs. I decided to take notes relating to this particular type because of just how difficult it is for me, given that they're my polar opposite and highest camaraderie with myself. And I've had so much difficulty and yet also so much joy because of ISFJs in my life that I really wanted to go out of my way to be as prepared for this episode as possible because I love them. I love ISFJs. And it's just a struggle. It's a struggle with them because they see me as this person who's a fraud or somebody who's trying to manipulate other people. And this particular episode is dedicated to the hypocrisy of ISFJs and some of the difficulties that people encounter when dealing with them. Don't forget, folks, these episodes are not necessarily for the individual types that they're about. They're really for everybody else and exposing everybody else's exposing their hypocrisies and how to deal with it to everybody else so that everyone is equipped to criticize them properly. Because honestly, who can survive without criticism in this world? That is what fathers are for, after all, right? It's all about given that we live in a fatherless society or a fatherless culture, it's not exactly a sure thing that we even have a future at this point. Especially when considering the prophecy of Malachi at the end of the Old Testament, saying that in the last days, I'll send my prophet Elijah to you, and he'll turn the hearts of fathers to their sons and the hearts of sons to their fathers. Or I will strike the land with a decree of utter destruction. And I wholeheartedly believe those days are upon us right now. Literally right now. And that's what we, as a culture here in Babylon, are dealing with. Babylon being the woman who rides the back of the beast. Lady Liberty, crowned with the 12 stars of Israel, the 12 tribes of Israel. Fascinating how that works. And we ride the back of the beast, Europe, as Europe has definitely admitted with the woman riding the beast on the back of the euro, as well as the woman riding the beast in front of European Parliament. So poetic, don't you think? And yet it's the ISFJs who spend the most time considering these spiritual issues, because out of all the 16 types, they're the ones who lead with faith. And that's what I admire about them the most, is that their unending, unshaken faith. I love that about them. It's inspiring, sometimes honoring, and then sometimes, I find them putting their faith into me and my work, and I always am so grateful for them to do that. Yet I hold this against them, right? Yeah, that's a quote from Revelation chapter 2 and 3, I believe. Yet I hold this against you. Hypocrisy. Hypocrisy is a disease that plagues every human being. The reason why we're hypocrites is because humanity is ultimately incomplete. Humanity is flawed, and it's a good thing. The flaws are actually what make us beautiful. The flaws at the end are actually what make us valuable. All of our pain and suffering, that is actually the source of our beauty, because it is through pain and suffering that we as a race gain humility, and humility is the source of our beauty to our Creator, after all. So we must not forget that, or at least resent the pain that we have in our life, because without pain, we have nothing to be defined by. We have nothing to be beautiful. Quite frankly, we have no value. We have no value as a race without our pain, without our suffering. So I recommend that, like ISFJs, we remember to lean into our pain sometimes and recognize the value in it, the lessons gained from it, the humility, obviously, the wisdom. Oh, beautiful wisdom. I love wisdom. And while I love it so much, yet I will admit I lack it many times, almost entirely. If I was to actually pray to God, I would ask him for wisdom and humility, but wisdom above all. Because without wisdom, it's really nothing. Just like the Apostle Paul says, without love, there is nothing. He's also right about that too. But you need one in order to have the other, right? And that's really the difference. That's really the difference. ISFJs understand this. I will admit that my mother, one of the best things that she ever did for me was read to me the book of Proverbs over and over and over, all 31 chapters. I'm honored that she did this for me. Helped lay down the foundation and the building blocks of what wisdom was and what it meant. I learned so much about life so quickly, just going through those 31 chapters and being subjected to her unshakable faith, her amazing faith as a person, as an ISFJ. And it helped develop my ISFJ subconscious slightly in those moments. I treasure them, and I always will treasure them, even though I am often a victim of her hypocrisy, as much as I am a victim of my own hypocrisy and my presumptions. It's funny, my mother criticized me really hard recently. She told me that I was arrogant. She had a problem with me deciding that I get to create social norms and shape social norms. Apparently she hasn't met a thinking perceiver before, you know what I'm saying? And that's the difference. That's what she's got to be aware of. She's got to be aware of that fact about how it's entirely necessary for TPs to help shape social norms. Because ISFJs have this problem where they will adopt social norms without questioning them. It's funny because when their extroverted feeling parent is underdeveloped, it creates this hypocrisy within them where they end up looking at the amount of people, the volume of people, because they're leading with their TE trickster. And they're measuring the volume of people that support an idea of some kind. And then because of that, they end up accepting that idea because it is a widely accepted idea, and then they will defend that idea without actually even verifying it for themselves, whether or not actually experimenting and trying out for themselves. This means they end up becoming the arbiter, if not the container, of conventional wisdom. And that's one of the biggest problems I have with ISFJs. And oftentimes, I have to end up deprogramming them of their false beliefs, beliefs that they never even tried out themselves, beliefs they never experimented on, beliefs they never looked into or researched. It's because they just have this desire, although they would say it's a need to be accepted. They want so desperately to be accepted. They want so desperately to be wanted. So if they go along with the majority of what people accept, it could be, for example, accepting that vaccines and taking these COVID vaccines is the right thing to do. And if it is the right thing to do, then everyone should do it. And then sometimes they accept that and, put that in front of other people. I really much understand. It's just the world we live in nowadays. The elite going out of their way to consolidate their power. You might want to ask yourselves, ISFJs that are watching this, and even the rest of the audience, you might want to ask yourselves, tell me, why haven't we had a world war in such a long time? You know what happened after World War II, right? The biggest baby boom in history. And it is core to the elite's belief system that overpopulation is the biggest threat to the environment, and the biggest threat to human existence, and the biggest threat to the world we live in. And they could not afford another baby boom. The baby boom was the true enemy, basically, after World War II. They could not allow it to happen again. These things terrify me. And if they don't terrify you ISFJs who are watching this, it should. Because this is the grand consequence of you defending the elite. And you don't even know you're doing it. Because you're TE Trickster. You know, I talked a lot about TE Trickster in the last Hypocrisy episode for the Hypocrisy of the INFJs, and I talk about how INFJs get gaslit by people, and then they start gaslighting themselves, and then as a result of that, they end up having a lot of problems in their life, and it really inhibits their growth and everything they are as humans, and it could really screw with them, and it's like they set up themselves for failure. But you know what? As much as that sucks, TE Critic also, there is definitely some gaslighting going on with the ISFJs. And ISFJs are so easily gaslit by family, by authority, any authority figure, people at church, leadership, etc. Those kinds of things. So easily gaslit. And do you know what they end up doing? When they're gaslit, they end up gaslighting other people. They gaslight others. They're not really so much gaslighting themselves. They end up gaslighting other people. Gaslighting people into thinking that, you know, masculinity is a bad thing. Because, for example, it's not welcome in church. Yet you will find more ISFJs in church than anywhere else. Yeah, masculinity is not allowed in church. Kind of interesting given how the ISFJ archetype is the most feminine of the 16 types. Kind of interesting how that works, huh? A lot of people don't even realize that. They don't even consider that. All these patterns. But hey, you know, TE Trickster just wants to round up or round down the patterns instead of actually spending the time to verify. And one of the reasons why, and here's another hypocrisy about them, is because they are scared of what they will find. Their NE inferior is so terrified of actually coming to know the truth. Because as soon as they know the truth, they know they would have to defend it. They know that they may have to actually put their life on the line. And that scares them. They know that they would have to take responsibility for once. And that scares them. It terrifies them. It haunts them all the time. All the time. And yet that's so unfair, isn't it? It is so unfair. How the ones who are all about justice and fairness are being unfair themselves. And that, quite frankly, is their biggest downfall. That is probably their biggest hypocrisy. And just dealing with that hypocrisy on a regular basis, on a daily basis, sometimes it's so hard for them to see past their own nose. Yet they're SI hero. Yet they have FI critic. And they can turn themselves inward. But no, they're so busy gaslighting other people because they themselves have been gaslit. Have you ever noticed how ISFJs do that? How whenever they're under suffering, they make those people around them, especially those closest to them, suffer just as much as they do. It's like that's how they covert contract people, like ESFJs do. But it's all about suffering. And there is none of the 16 types that enjoys shared misery more than an ISFJ. And sharing their misery and imposing their own misery on other people. They do this consistently. And that's one of the worst parts about them. I can't stand that. My own mother does this to me. She has this thing where, she'll take up a cause. And that's how my mom is. She always hops from cause to cause to cause. She was in Amway once. God, that was horrible. She got into real estate investing. Still in real estate investing. That too is horrible. She went from church to church to church to church. And now she's the wife of the pastor at her church and the leader of the women at her church. She's also, she did a lot of youth group, when I was growing up. Tons of accomplishments. But always having to follow someone or something. Because that's what ISFJs do best. They follow. They don't lead, they follow. And they are the most easily convinced and gaslit into following anyone and anything. Because their TE trickster just doesn't want to filter out what people are saying or test what people are saying. They'd rather just round up or round down. Oh, that sounds sensible, or that sounds right. That sounds affiliative. That sounds like doing the right thing. Then they check their brain at the door, and they don't even use their brain. The other thing is that they so enjoy being listened to. It makes them feel important. It makes them feel special. Oh, I'm giving somebody help by giving them conventional advice. And the fact that these people listen to me means that I'm important, right? Means that I don't have to feel so bad about myself anymore. I'm the one people listen to instead of me being the listener. And ISFJs, for some reason, they all have this thought where they're like, if I listen, that means I deserve to speak. No, they don't. No, they don't. Why do they get to elect themselves the judge of who deserves what? Can someone please explain that to me? Why do ISFJs always elect themselves the judge of who deserves what? They're the worst of the 16 types, always talking about who deserves what, always. Yet in their judgment, they don't even take the time to verify the standards by which they judge other people. And that is the absolute worst part about them. I can't stand it. My mother constantly thinks I'm a bad person all the time, labeling me behind my back about how, wow, you abandoned your children. You left them behind. Now you have to pay. You have to suffer because you make them suffer. And it's just, again, more shared suffering, more shared misery. That's what it is. That's what it always is about with ISFJs. They're all about getting even. Getting even is like the most important thing to ISFJs. And that's why you never want to tell an ISFJ if you're doing good, ultimately. An ISFJ that's close to you, that is. Like an ISFJ, like with familial ties, etc. You never really want to reveal if you're doing good, because if someone else they're close to is doing bad, what they'll do unconsciously with their ESFP shadow is they will just tear you down and bring them to that other suffering person's level. Or if they themselves are suffering, they will bring you down so that you are at their level, because shared misery, right? Oh my God. It's so disgusting. I hate when they do that. There's an ISFJ in my life, though, who doesn't do that to me. I'm so thankful for him. I'm so thankful for him every fucking day. I love that man dearly. I also love the example and the faith that he has, and that regardless of his hardships or even regardless of his own mistakes, he still keeps moving forward, and he still keeps kicking ass, and he still takes responsibility. And above all, he's not only willing to challenge me where I'm wrong and help me have a heart, but he's also always willing to listen. And I really appreciate that about him. And I've seen him grow over many years, where he will get to a point where he'll start filtering out, he'll keep filtering out more and more people's voices that he shouldn't listen to. Because, like all IFJs, I should give everyone a voice, right? In ISFJs, it's like, it's my duty to give everyone else a voice, right? Because then it'll be everyone else's duty to give me a voice, right? No, that's cognitive projection. And if you think about it, that's technically entitled. That's entitlement. That's wrong. That's not true. You don't just deserve to speak because you listen. And I don't understand why ISFJs think they deserve so much. I really don't understand this. Like, why? Why do they think they deserve things? Why do they think that they get to decide who deserves what? Justice? Fairness? That's what an ISFJ would say. They'd say it's all about justice and fairness. But who elected them to judge? And how are they so wise? And how are they so humble that they really know how to judge in that way? You know what's funny? The wisest man who walked the earth in history, his name was King Solomon. Let me tell you something. He wasn't an ISFJ. But even he didn't elect himself the judge of who deserved what. Because he realized just how silly that was. Because if you actually consider it, really, humanity just deserves death. Humanity deserves nothing. So as a result of that, it becomes a serious problem over time. That's what humanity really deserves. They really deserve annihilation. They deserve death. We're so flawed. We're so incomplete. But the thing is, yet, our Creator still strives with us, still tolerates us, still puts up with us. Because to Him, we're beautiful. And we're beautiful to Him because we are flawed, right? It's all about the flaws. Flaws are everything. INFJs, they go out of their way to be so perfect all the time, but they just don't understand that it is their flaws and their failures that actually make them beautiful. Whereas the ISFJ standpoint is that, look, I just want to destroy the beautiful thing because I don't feel beautiful right now, so nothing can be beautiful around me. That's their idea of perfection. Their idea of perfection is evening the playing field for everybody. The problem is, it's like it kind of ends up being like turning into like some form of communism. If you take everything that anyone has earned and give it to everybody, there won't be enough for anybody. And then everybody will die. And it's so funny to watch ISFJs actually buy into that communistic bullshit consistently. I'm not calling ISFJ communists either, and I'm not saying that they would typically, fall into the trap of communism. What I am saying is that whatever is generally acceptable, socially acceptable around them, they just adopt anyway. And, the feminine primary social order is socially acceptable, right? I had an ISFJ in my face the other day in a locker room. I was explaining the concept of masculine idealism and feminine solipsism to somebody. And he got in my face and saying, "How dare you say that women are entitled at birth?" And I'm like, but it's true. And men are self-sacrificing at birth. That's just how they are. And they have to learn to be less self-sacrificing, just like women have to learn how to be less entitled. That's what it means to be a man or a woman. That is our journey. He couldn't accept that because of his ego investments. But that's the problem with an ISFJ, is that you can gaslight ego investments into an ISFJ. They are extremely programmable. And then once you program them psychologically, they'll start programming everyone around them with their social mastery and their social wiles, to the point where everyone will adopt the new social norm, and then everyone will forget where it came from, and then it will become tradition. And that's why ISFJs are the keepers of tradition, because tradition is everything to them, because tradition is safe. And what is socially accepted by people around them, that's safe. And that's them playing it safe. The problem is by playing it safe, they're not really going to have a very good life, because their NI demon is going out of their way trying to teach them that they need to take risks. And taking risks is everything. They need to learn how to take risks. The thing is that the ISFJs are so scared of taking risks that they don't want to take risks alone. Show me an ISFJ who can take risks alone. Show me. See, that's a real ISFJ. That's an ISFJ who has so much personal strength, so much capability. That is an ISFJ I respect. An ISFJ who has suffered so much in this world that they have become so much stronger because of it, because they realize, it's just like, you ever see Return of Jafar, the Disney movie? It's the sequel to Aladdin. In that film, they're constantly saying, hey, well, genies can't kill, right? Genies can't kill. Well, then you have Iago or Jafar or the genie saying, you'd be surprised what you can live through. That is everything to an ISFJ. You would really be surprised what you can live through. And that's the thing. ISFJs who have suffered so much and gotten through so much, they can use their SI hero and look backwards and realize, yeah, I really have been through a lot. I really have been through a lot more than anyone else. That proves that I'm strong, and I'm stronger than anyone else I've ever met. That proves my own personal strength. You know what I'm saying? And because they have that proof of personal strength, all of a sudden they realize that they can take risks on their own. God, those are the ISFJs. Those are the ones I respect. Those are the ISFJs I want to be more like, because they're not pussies. And I am constantly afraid of being weak with my SI inferior. But then to learn from their camaraderie-based example, to grow from the ISFJ's example, an ISFJ who angelically is able to take risks because they know they'll be able to handle whatever consequence on their own comes from them taking such a risk. I want to be more like that. I want to be more like that. But instead, they allow their fear to overcome them. And then they don't want to take those risks by themselves. And sometimes then they feel bad and guilt themselves, because it's like, oh, well, if I'm going to take a risk with somebody else, I might be bringing them down. And then they end up feeling like a burden to that person. So no actual risk takes place. Then as a result, nothing changes. The church doesn't change. Society doesn't change. Schools don't change. Fatherlessness is still a problem. Abortion, people dying like that. Cancer, health. The laws don't change. Why isn't monosodium glutamate illegal in this country? It's illegal in many countries, just not here. That's so ridiculous. When are the ISFJs going to rise up for true justice? Well, it'll happen when they understand what justice really actually is. But they won't find out without suffering. But they avoid suffering. They're afraid of suffering. And they're afraid of the suffering that taking risks takes. But if they're not going to be willing to take risks, then the Russians may as well invade their homeland and take everything that they have from them. You know what I'm saying, folks? The ISFJs would be too scared to even rise up and challenge their new masters and continue to live in the slavery that they've always lived in. Do you think it's easy for an ISFJ to take the red pill? They almost always take the blue pill in life. They go right back into the Matrix. The story ends, show's over. Yet it's so funny that Morpheus himself is an ISFJ, and he's the one distributing the pills. That's an ISFJ I can get behind, folks. You know, I've been saying for a while that war is coming. It's in the Ukraine now. It'll probably spread like a cancer or a virus to the rest of the world. We'll see. I think it's likely, because this too has to come to pass in order for the future that has been written to come to pass. ISFJs, watch out for these hypocrisies. People in their lives, hold them accountable for these hypocrisies. Be careful what you tell an ISFJ, because they'll remember it, and you never know when they're going to attempt to take up someone else's cause at your expense, because you're better off than that person is. So we're gonna level the playing field for you both. You know, this person, they're suffering, but you're not suffering, but I'm gonna make you suffering so that your suffering matches their suffering. Because, you know, in the name of fairness, right? That's just, that's fair, right? No, it's not. I wager that the two women arguing over a baby, standing before King Solomon, and one woman is claiming that baby is her son, the other woman is claiming that the baby is her son, what would happen? So King Solomon said to the two women, he said, all right, well, we're gonna cut the baby in half then, and each of you will get half. And then one of the women said, stop, as the soldier came close with his sword. And she said, I will relinquish my claim. Just let the child live. And she allowed the other woman to take the child. And then Solomon said, stop. And then Solomon ordered that the baby be given over to the woman who basically gave up. Because he's like, that woman is the child's real mother, because a real mother would not allow her son to be killed. I wonder if an ISFJ king would have actually gone through with killing the child and cutting that child in half. A really unhealthy one for sure. A very hypocritical one for sure. Learn from Solomon's example, ISFJs. How about you guys actually be wise instead of clinging to safe, conventional wisdom? Because by clinging to safe, conventional wisdom, you are literally making everybody else in your life suffer. All of the people who are closest to you, you are making them suffer. But of course, right? It's only fair because everyone's suffering, right? That's how you justify it, right? You're always so justified in ruining everyone else's life. Just like my mother. She found out I was having premarital sex. She pressured me into marrying my my now ex-wife. And then later, during my marriage, she told me how much she regrets that I married my ex-wife. She also said, I don't want you to marry her. And then she even actually encouraged me to leave her and divorce her. And then I did. And then my mother now judges me for it. And even to the point of saying my current marriage is illegitimate and that her new grandson is illegitimate, right? That's how she treats us. And it's just so ridiculous to see her change her position like that about me over time, to the point where I've realized it doesn't matter what I do. It doesn't matter how I act. It doesn't matter what I say. I'm still just going to be a failure in her eyes. I'm still going to be an evil person in her eyes. I'm still not going to be worthy of being her son. Instead, she'll treat me just like it says in Proverbs, like the foolish son, who is nothing more than rot in your bones. And that's how I literally feel or believe. That's what I believe my mother feels about me, that I am nothing more than rot in her bones. It's kind of sad, but I understand. You know, my grandfather, he was a very harsh parent to my ISFJ mother. Very harsh parent. He'd beat her brothers all the time. And it would scare her. It very, very much scare her. And she struggled with that. She struggled with it so much. To the point of, like, you know, she took that harsh parenting and parented me. She definitely would lay a hand on me often. And that's one of the reasons why ISFJs can feel so justified in their hypocrisy, especially when they're leveling the playing field among people or themselves, or promoting shared misery in their life. Because from their perspective it's fair, it's just. I suffered this. What makes you think that you don't suffer the same way that I do? That's not fair. So I'm justified in parenting you this way. I'm justified in treating you this way because it's how I've always been treated. When the reality of the situation is, the ISFJ needs to learn how to actually have boundaries and enforce boundaries. And their FI critic needs to understand that it's okay to have boundaries. And they also need to understand that it's right for them to take risks, especially risks alone. They know that they can handle it, because the attitude they should have is that, yeah, I've been through a lot of suffering, and then they should just take their reward of congratulations. You're really strong, and you're stronger than everybody else. But instead, they go out of their way to increase everyone else's suffering, because it's like, hey, you know, I'm going to make you strong like me, right? With their ESFP shadow, kind of like an ESTP beating his younger ISTJ brother because he sees him as a weakling. And it's like, oh, the kids at school beat him up, so I got to beat him up ahead of time so he's strong enough to face them. And I'm like, wow, thank you, you abusive ESTP. The ISFJs, it's a lot more subtle. It's hidden. Their abuse, their hypocrisy, the abuse that comes from their hypocrisy is very hidden. Because from their perspective, they believe their abuse is righteous. They literally believe it's righteous. And it's not. There's nothing righteous about it. They should just accept that they're stronger than other people without having to mete out that punishment or that so-called justice onto others. Because every time they do, this is where the TI child God complex shows up in the ISFJ. They elect themselves the judge of who deserves what. Even to the point of saying they deserve more, or they deserve what other people have had or do have because of their own suffering, because of their own bitterness. And the more bitterness they have, the more envious they get of other people. And then due to that envy, they tear those people down slowly over time as a result of their envy, because they just can't stand other people around them being happier than them, when all they have to do to make themselves happier is take a risk. That's all they have to do. It literally comes down to that. But they play it safe so much that they're not willing to take a risk. And that just really bothers me about them. I can't, sometimes I just can't believe it. It's always so very ridiculous how that happens over and over and over. It's wrong. I've been a victim of this my whole life. I still love my mom though. I love her dearly. I always wanted her to accept me. But as part of my midlife crisis, I've learned that that'll probably never happen. See, ISFJs have this holier than thou perspective. That's part of their hypocrisy, where it's like, I've suffered more, and I've sacrificed more, and I've done it for a good cause. That makes me better than you. That means I get to elect myself the judge, and I get to choose what you deserve. It's so frustrating. I think I ran out of juice here. Maybe not. Holier than thou, more righteous than thee. Because I'm more righteous than thee, I get to choose for thee. I get to judge what you deserve. And that's literally their GI child God complex. They're literally playing God every time they choose who deserves what, because they feel entitled to it, and they feel entitled to it because of their bitterness, because they're envious of what other people have, because it's like, I've suffered more than that person. Why do they get to be happy, right? Oh my God. I know that's definitely a thing, because you know what, folks? I do the exact same thing. I'm guilty of that. Because I have the same deadly sin, the deadly sin of envy. I share that with the ISFJs, my ISFJ brothers and sisters, my ISFJ mother, my fellow crusaders. In this quest for fairness and justice, we end up tearing down the innocent and supporting the guilty in the process. And that, my friends, is the worst result of ISFJ hypocrisy. They end up giving power and supporting the power of the guilty at the expense of the innocent, because they're just so warped by being gaslit so much by society and conventional wisdom their whole life, and they end up gaslighting everybody else with that same conventional wisdom, trying to justify it and saying, oh, I'm just trying to keep everyone safe, I'm trying to treat everyone safe. And it's like, no, you're playing it safe and you're unwilling to take risks, the risks that your NI demon wants you to take, that you deep down really do want to take. And you know what? You don't have to justify those risks. Isn't happiness enough to justify it? Isn't that enough? It's your life. You're not going to have another one, right? That's the problem. That's the difference. They don't understand it. You know, it's like, hey, I'm going to listen to just about anyone, and then they hear everyone. But the problem is that they become everyone that they hear. That's the issue with the ISFJ. You know, I tell INFJs, you know, get the losers out of your life consistently. I tell them to. The problem is when the losers are out of an ISFJ life, the ISFJ mimics those losers and they stay losers. That's really the struggle they have. That's really and you know, they just make everybody else miserable. They end up actually taking away other people's freedom and other people's future, because they're forcing everybody to act the same way, to act like them, because they elect themselves more righteous, more holier than everybody else. And then they get to play God. They get to decide who deserves what. Because from their perspective, well, I didn't deserve this, I didn't deserve that, and yet these bad things happen to me. And it's like the whole bad things happen to good people thing. I'm a good person, why is this happening to me? And then they make everybody else deal with it. You know, and here's another thing that here's another hypocrisy that's really, really sick. They have this really sick, demented Robin Hood complex, where they will rob and take from other people and obligate other people, and this is part of evening the playing field, and give it to somebody else. So they'll act like, for example, I have ISFJs in my life. Like, even my mother-in-law does this. My mom used to do it to me all the time. I mean, she still would if I would have let myself be around her. But what would happen is that, like, my mother-in-law would ask, and actually she just did this to my wife the other day. She would ask my wife for a favor, and it seemed like the favor was for her, but really the favor ended up being for someone else. And then my wife's like, but I was doing it for you. I didn't want to do it for someone else. I was doing it for you because I love you. And then her mom's like, well, I've done all of these things for you, and I've been very supportive of you, so I need a favor from you to do for someone else. And then the ISFJ won't even take it for themselves, because FI critic. So when the ISFJ actually really does need help, they've given all their favors that were owed to them, owed in quotes, to them, to other people, and there's none left for them anymore. You see what I'm saying? And then that's how they become a burden. And then they get even more bitter, and then they start covert contracting everyone, and then electing themselves the judge. Because again, it all stems back to their worst hypocrisy, which is they elect themselves. They're supposedly the ones who get to choose who deserves what, and they don't. I'm here to tell you folks that nobody deserves anything. No one deserves love. No one deserves respect. No one deserves money. No one deserves this clean air we breathe. No one deserves this sunshine. No one deserves a goddamn thing. You can't earn love. You can't earn respect. These things are only given. But ISFJs will take, and they will take these things because they believe they deserve it, or they will take on someone else's behalf because that other person supposedly deserves it. You know, it's all a lie. There's nothing true about that. It's all bullshit. And that's the problem, folks. That's the main issue with the life we live in. And very few people can actually accept that. Very few ISFJs, yet they're the most common of all the types. They really can't accept that. Because from their perspective, what is my suffering even worth? And that right there, folks, that is the key issue. They're trying to figure out, was my suffering actually worth it? Well, I'm here to say, yes. Yes, it is. Their suffering was absolutely worth it because their suffering is the source of their strength. And if they could just look back in their life and compare themselves to themselves, just like an INFJ should, to stop gaslighting, they should compare themselves to themselves and see everything that they've been through. Because just like Jafar says, you'd be surprised what you could live through. As soon as an ISFJ starts paying attention to what they've lived through, they realize that they can take the risks and risk happiness because they can live through the consequences because they've lived through far worse. That's the key to ISFJ happiness. ISFJs, you'd be surprised what you can live through. You'd be surprised what kind of happiness you can have. To tell you the truth, you know, life is far more precious and far more beautiful than you realize. You just have to take it for yourself and stop feeling guilty about it. Because when you feel guilty, you're still playing God and saying, I don't deserve this. You have no right to even judge what you yourself deserve. That's a fact. If I'm standing before the Son of God on the day of judgment, and he condemns me and throws me into the pit, rejects me, and I am to burn as a result, do you know what my attitude would be? Full agreement. I would agree with him because his judgment is just. Not yours, not mine, not any of us. That's how perfect his judgment is. Could you imagine that? Can you really imagine that level of judgment? And that right there is why you cannot elect yourself the judge. You cannot decide who deserves what. Why? Because you're bitter? Because you're envious? You can't do that. Stop being this dark Robin Hood where you are literally taking from other people to give to others. You are not that righteous. You can't even take the risks required to be happy. And because of that, you're just increasing the misery in the world instead of actually creating a world with opportunity and a better future and choices for even your own children. And you don't even realize that in the process of taking for the sake of others that you're doing, you're actually just selling your children downriver. You're actually selling their future downriver. You might want to understand that because of this, the guilty rule over the innocent because you elect yourselves the judge of what's deserving. Because it's very easy for the guilty to make the innocent look guilty. And then you just assume, because you're rounding up and down, that everyone is just as guilty. Therefore, everyone is equally deserving of having what they have taken away from them. Because from your perspective, that's fair, right? Because the only thing fair about life is that life is unfair. And it was unfair that you, the innocent, had everything taken away from you. You, who were innocent, had bad things happen to you in your life that you know that you didn't deserve, yet it happened anyway. So then you feel justified in not caring if other people are suffering, or justified in increasing their suffering or increasing their misery because you suffered. That's wrong. And that's a very bad covert contract with life. You have to look inward. And like the INFJs, you have to compare yourselves to yourselves and actually take inventory of all of your suffering and realize that suffering has made you strong enough to take risks on your own. Folks, if you're watching this and you have an ISFJ in your life, you must admonish them and challenge them in this area. And any time that they're acting holier than thou, or justified, or trying to play fairness, or being the dark Robin Hood, you need to challenge them and call them out on it immediately. And tell them that they're literally playing God. Just like my mother plays God towards me all the time. To the point where it's as if she treats me like I'm not even human. My wife constantly talks about how when the first time she met our son, she wouldn't even hold our son. Wow. It's ridiculous. It's unbelievable. I love my mother. I always love my mother. But if she's gonna just elect herself the judge like that and find the innocent guilty, she can't be in my life. And that, folks, right there is the outcome, the actual outcome to the ISFJ hypocrisy. It literally is. They're just finding the innocent guilty, judging them, judge, jury, and executioner all at once, and punishing the innocent, even though they're not guilty. And the ISFJ is like, well, I wasn't guilty when I was punished, so it's only fair. Wow. If you found this lecture useful, helpful, educational, or enlightening, please leave a comment below. And please find the ISFJs in your life and get this message to them. I don't want anyone else to suffer like I have suffered at the hands of an ISFJ. And I say that knowing full well that I do cause other people suffering myself, and I have my own hypocrisies, especially with my presumption, but I'm working on it just like everyone else is. But the only way human beings can work on these things is if we challenge each other and criticize each other and hold each other accountable. If you notice something about the most unhealthy of ISFJs are the ones who actually run from accountability instead of seeking accountability. You don't want to be around one of those. That's my mother, for example. She'll just dismiss my voice because apparently the voice of the majority, the voice of what is socially acceptable, is more important to her than the voice of her own son. That's ridiculous. Don't be that ISFJ, folks. And don't let the ISFJs in your life turn into that. I promise you that if they just realize how strong they actually are, they actually could be happy, because then they'd be willing to take the risk because they know they can always handle whatever consequences come in their way because they are that strong. So, and that's what they need to know. And that's how you help them fight their hypocrisy. Please, I beg this audience, please go to the ISFJs and make them understand this so that they can be free. And so that when they're free, everyone else will be free as well. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys tonight.
You stole